The rain hammered against the hospital window as David stood in the hallway, his $1,000 shoes soaking wet, his hands trembling. Inside that room was Sarah, the woman who'd loved him when he had nothing, or so she believed. The doctor had just given him a choice no amount of money could make easier: approve the experimental treatment that might save her life, but would require revealing who he really was, or let her die believing the lie that had given her the only genuine happiness she'd ever known. He reached for the door handle, then pulled back. Some decisions destroy you either way. But to understand how a billionaire ended up here, breaking apart in a hospital corridor, we need to go back 6 months. If you love stories about real love, impossible choices, and shocking twists, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. 6 months earlier, David Morrison sat in his private estate library, surrounded by luxury, and realized he was completely alone. At 32, he'd built a manufacturing empire worth $3.8 billion. He had everything, except the answer to one question that haunted him. Would anyone love him if he was nobody? His last relationship had ended when he'd overheard his girlfriend on the phone. "Of course I love him, Mother. Do you know what he's worth?" That night, David made a decision that his lawyers would have called insane. He would disappear. He created a new identity, David Parker, a freelance photographer struggling to make rent. He rented a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood, bought clothes from discount stores, and learned to check his bank account before buying coffee. He even got a part-time job at a small bookstore called The Reading Corner. That's where he met Sarah Mitchell. She walked in on his 3rd day, her nursing scrub still on from her shift at the community clinic, exhaustion written across her face. But when she smiled at him while asking for a book recommendation, something in David's carefully constructed world shifted. "Long day?" he asked, surprising himself with how easily the authentic version of himself emerged. 16 hours, she sighed, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "But there's a kid on the 4th floor who finally smiled today, so worth it." She wasn't looking at his watch. He'd left the expensive timepiece in a safe. She wasn't calculating his net worth. She was just present, real. "I'm Sarah," she said. "David," he replied, and for the first time in years, he felt like that name meant something true. Over the next 3 months, David fell in love in ways he didn't know existed. Sarah showed him her world, not the world of charity galas and tax-deductible donations, but the real, grinding, beautiful struggle of people who fought for every small victory. They had coffee dates where they split the bill. She taught him to cook pasta when money was tight at the end of the month. He walked her home through neighborhoods he'd only seen from highway overpasses. One night, in her tiny apartment with its second-hand furniture and walls covered in children's drawings from her patients, Sarah curled up against him on her worn couch. "You know what I love about you?" she whispered. David's heart seized. Here it comes, he thought, the moment she asks what he does, where his family money is, what his prospects are. "You see me," she continued. "Everyone at the hospital, they see Nurse Mitchell. My family sees the daughter who sends money home. But you see Sarah, just Sarah." David held her tighter, guilt rising in his throat like bile. "I see you," he whispered back, the truth and the lie tangled together. But their happiness was fragile, built on his deception. One evening, Sarah's closest friend, Rachel, pulled him aside at a birthday party. "She's falling hard for you," Rachel said, her eyes sharp. "Sarah's been hurt before, by guys who wanted something from her, who saw her as a stepping stone or a fling. She thinks you're different. Please don't prove her wrong." "I won't," promised David, not knowing he already had. The following week, Sarah opened up about her dreams. They were walking through the park, her hand in his, when she said, "I'm saving for my own clinic, somewhere people can get real care, not just what insurance allows. It'll take me maybe 10 more years, but I'm at $23,000 saved. David's mind immediately calculated. He could write a check right now, make her dream happen tomorrow. But David Parker, the struggling photographer, could barely afford his own rent. "That's incredible," he said, hating himself. "You'll get there." "We'll get there," she corrected, squeezing his hand. "I can see us building something real together, David, something that matters." That night, alone in his modest apartment, David sat on the floor and wept. He'd run an experiment to find authentic love, and he'd found it, but now he was trapped in his own lie.
The truth began to crack on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah's mother needed emergency surgery, a procedure her insurance barely covered. Sarah was at the hospital, frantic, trying to figure out how to pay the $15,000 gap. She called David, sobbing. "I don't know what to do. I've emptied my clinic savings. I've called everyone. David, I'm so scared." He stood in his real office, surrounded by wealth that could solve this with a single phone call. His personal assistant looked at him expectantly. She knew about Sarah, had been sworn to secrecy. One word and the money would transfer. But wouldn't that reveal everything? Wouldn't that destroy what they had? "I'll figure something out," David heard himself say. "Give me 24 hours. He hung up and put his face in his hands. His assistant, Patricia, spoke quietly. "Sir, with respect, what are you doing?" "I don't know," he whispered. That night, David did something that would haunt him forever. He created a fake story about a commission that came through, a big client who'd paid him $20,000 for a wedding photography package. He brought Sarah a cashier's check. She stared at it, tears streaming down her face. "David, this is your whole savings, isn't it? Everything you had?" He nodded, the lie smooth and practiced now. "I can't take this," she said, trying to push it back. "Yes, you can," he insisted. "Your mother needs this. We'll be okay. We'll always be okay." She threw her arms around him, holding him like he was the most precious thing in her world. "I don't deserve you," she cried. "How did I get so lucky?" David held her, feeling like the worst person alive, because he knew the truth. He hadn't sacrificed anything. That money was nothing to him, less than he spent on wine at a single business dinner. The real David Morrison hadn't given up a thing. Only the fake David Parker had appeared to sacrifice everything. But Sarah didn't know that. She loved David Parker, the struggling photographer who'd given her his last dollar. She had no idea that David Morrison, the billionaire, was watching her love a ghost. 2 weeks later, the unraveling truly began. Sarah was at his apartment, his fake modest apartment, when her phone rang. It was a colleague from the hospital speaking loud enough for David to hear. "Sarah, you'll never believe who just donated $20 million to build a new children's wing. David Morrison, that manufacturing billionaire. He's apparently doing a whole press tour next week. Wait, isn't your boyfriend named David?" Sarah laughed. "Different guy. My David can barely afford his rent." She said it with such pride, such love for his supposed struggle, that David felt something break inside him. That night, she fell asleep in his arms, and he stared at the ceiling, knowing the press tour was real, knowing his face would be everywhere soon. He had 1 week before his two worlds collided. David decided to tell her. He planned the perfect moment, a quiet dinner at her place, where he would explain everything, how he'd needed to know if love could exist without money, how he'd found that love with her, how every moment had been real, even if his identity wasn't. But fate had other plans. 3 days before his planned confession, Sarah came to the bookstore during his shift, her face pale. She thrust her phone at him without a word. On the screen was a news article. "Manufacturing tycoon David Morrison's secret romance. Is he slumming it for fun?" There was a photo of him at a charity gala 2 years ago in a tuxedo shaking hands with the mayor, and next to it a recent photo someone had snapped of him and Sarah at the coffee shop, laughing together. The article was cruel. Sources say Morrison has been playing poor to romance a nurse from the East Side. Friends wonder if it's a social experiment or just a bored billionaire's sick game. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me this is wrong. Tell me this is a terrible mistake." David opened his mouth, but no words came. "David," her voice broke on his name. "Please, I can explain." "So it's true." She stepped back like he'd struck her. Everything was a lie?" "No." He reached for her, but she pulled away. "My feelings were real. Every moment with you was real." "Real?" She laughed, a broken sound. "You lied about who you are. You watched me struggle, watched me empty my savings, let me believe you were sacrificing for me when it was all just, what, pocket change to you?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, David? Or is that even your real name?" "It is. David Morrison. I just—" "Stop." Tears streamed down her face. "That money you gave me for my mother, I cried myself to sleep thinking about your sacrifice. I promised myself I'd spend the rest of my life making it up to you. And it was nothing to you. Less than nothing." "That's not fair." "Fair?" She raised her voice. "You want to talk about fair? I loved you. I loved a man who doesn't exist. I'm standing right here." "No, you're not. David Parker is who I loved, the guy who understood what it meant to count every dollar, who got why my dreams mattered, because he had dreams too. But you?" She looked at him like a stranger. "You were just playing dress-up in my life." David felt his world crumbling. "Sarah, please let me explain why I did this." "I don't care why." She turned toward the door, then stopped. "Actually, I do care. Tell me one thing. Did you laugh at me? When I was so proud of my $23,000 savings, did you laugh?" "God, no. I loved you more in that moment." "Don't." She held up her hand. "Don't say you love me. You don't love me. You loved the idea of me, the noble nurse who loved you despite your poverty. It was all just a story to you, wasn't it? A way to feel something real in your fake life." She walked out, and David stood frozen, unable to follow.
For 2 months, David tried everything to reach Sarah. She blocked his number, moved apartments, and transferred to a different hospital. His money, his power, his connections, none of it could buy him back into her life. He fell into a depression that worried his board of directors. He stopped attending meetings, stopped caring about the empire he'd built. What was the point of any of it? Then, one rainy afternoon, Patricia rushed into his office. "Sir, it's Sarah. She's at Memorial Hospital. There was an accident at her new job, chemical exposure. She's very sick." David ran. He arrived at the hospital to find Sarah's mother in the waiting room. When she saw him, her face hardened. "You have some nerve showing up here." "How is she?" "Dying." The word hit him like a bullet. "The treatment she needs costs $800,000. Experimental, not covered by insurance. We don't have it. And Sarah—" her voice broke. "Sarah made me promise not to contact you. She'd rather die than owe you anything." David felt the floor drop out from under him. I'll pay for everything." "She'll refuse." "Then don't tell her it's from me." Sarah's mother studied his face for a long moment. "You really love her, don't you? Not the experiment version, the real thing. More than my own life." She shook her head slowly. "Then you need to hear something. Sarah, she knew." David's world stopped. "What?" "She knew who you were. She figured it out 6 weeks into your relationship. One of her patients was reading a business magazine with your photo. She saw it." "That's impossible," she never said. "Because she loved you anyway." Sarah's mother's eyes filled with tears. "She knew you were lying, and she chose to let you keep lying because she understood why. She saw through your disguise to something true underneath. And when you gave her that money for my surgery, she knew it wasn't a sacrifice for you financially, but she also knew it was the first time you'd let your real self show, even just a crack. She treasured that."
David couldn't breathe. Then why did she leave when the article came out? Because you didn't trust her with the truth. She waited, David. She waited for you to trust her enough to confess. And when you didn't, when you let her find out from a cruel tabloid article instead of from you, that's what broke her heart. Not the money, the fact that after 6 months together, you still didn't trust her with who you really were. David sank into a chair, his hands over his face. All this time, he'd thought he was protecting their love by hiding himself. But Sarah had already seen him, really seen him, and loved him anyway. And he'd been too afraid to trust in that love. "Let me see her, please."
Which brought him to this moment, standing in the hospital corridor, rain-soaked and broken, with a choice that would define the rest of his life. The doctor had been clear. The treatment requires her consent. She's conscious but weak. If you go in there as David Morrison, the billionaire, she might refuse the help out of pride. But if you go in as David Parker, she might accept, not knowing the truth. So here was his choice: lie again and save her life, or tell the truth and risk losing her forever. David pushed open the door. Sarah lay in the hospital bed, pale but still beautiful. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. David pulled a chair to her bedside and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "I know you know," he said softly. Her eyes widened. "Your mother told me that you figured out who I was months ago." He squeezed her hand gently. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I let you find out from a tabloid instead of from me. I'm sorry I was such a coward." "David, I have enough money to pay for your treatment 1,000 times over, but I'm not going to make that decision for you. I'm here to ask, to beg you to let me help, not because you owe me anything, not because of who I am or what I have, but because losing you would destroy me, and I hope, maybe losing me would hurt you too." Sarah's tears fell freely now. "I was so angry at you." "I know. But I also understood. I grew up poor, David. I know what it's like to wonder if people see you or just what they can get from you. You were looking for something real." She smiled weakly. "The irony is, what we had was real, all of it. Even the lies were real in their own strange way. So you'll accept the treatment?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "On one condition." "Anything." "No more David Parker, no more David Morrison, just David, the man who loves photography and gets lost in bookstores and holds me like I'm the most precious thing in the world. That's who I fell in love with. That's who I want." David felt something unlock in his chest, something that had been closed for years. "That's who I want to be." "Then yes, I'll fight for us." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then whispered, "I should tell you something else. The clinic you wanted to open, I already bought the building, signed the papers yesterday. It's in your name, no strings attached. Whether you forgive me or not, whether we work out or not, your dream gets to be real." Sarah started to cry harder. "You impossible man!" "Is that a yes to a second chance?" She pulled him closer, her lips near his ear. David Parker would have asked more nervously. David Morrison would have been more confident. But just David asks perfectly. Outside, the rain began to slow. Inside, two people who'd found each other through lies began building something true. 6 months later, at the opening of the Sarah Mitchell Community Clinic, David stood in the back of the crowd. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit, just jeans and a nice shirt. In his hands was a camera. He'd actually taken up photography for real. Sarah was giving a speech about second chances and the power of seeing people for who they really are. When she finished, she found him in the crowd. "Hey, photographer guy," she said with a grin. "Want to take my picture?" "Every day for the rest of my life," he replied. "That's a long assignment. I'm hoping for a permanent position." She kissed him, there in front of everyone, the nurses, the community members, the local press. Someone snapped a photo. This time, when it appeared online, the headline read, "Local nurse and partner open free clinic. Love story inspires millions." They didn't mention David's money. They didn't need to, because in the end, this was never a story about a billionaire pretending to be poor. It was a story about two people learning to trust that love, real love, sees past everything to what matters most. And that kind of love, it's priceless.